Ace Attorney Justice for All is the sequel to the first Ace Attorney game. It is the second one in the series, and as I said before in the previous video, which you should check out if you haven't, I'm going to go through all 10 of the games, possibly Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright, depending on how I feel about it. This is the second video in that series. Let's begin the discussion about Ace Attorney Justice for All. Ace Attorney Justice for All is the second game in the Ace Attorney franchise. This game improved some of the things beforehand and added on some things not seen before. Now, what did I personally think of this game? Let's find out, because I think this could be a really good time. If you've played the first Ace Attorney game, which I think you should have if you're watching the second video in a 10-part series, though I believe you can probably get through some of the whatever, that's beside the point. Essentially, Ace Attorney is a series. This is the second game in that series, which means it should be a natural evolution of what happened in the first game. This is true in most cases. We of course know about Chapter 5 from the first Ace Attorney game, which came out in 2005 compared to 2001. Justice for All came out in 2002. Now, you follow Phoenix Wright as he goes through 4 more chapters of insane trials that are genuinely a level above what happened last time. Are they better or worse? Well, it's debatable. We'll talk about that more in the story-based part. But they did improve some of the things I had gripes with. They made the investigations more involved with the Magatama, an item that adds stakes to the investigations rather than being a blindless, endless wandering journey. The problem still remains, though, with the investigations. They still can be very confusing, and while I have heard it will get better throughout later in the franchise, these first 2 games have not been very great to investigate through. While I understand they are important to the story, they need some improvement in the end, okay? Like, genuinely, we need some improvement when it comes to these investigations. They are not bad per se, as it lets you theorize about what's happening. And in fact, in the 4th chapter, it has one of the best types of investigation, with some of the best reveals happening in this investigation. These investigations are generally a better experience. The trials, though, they're the same. There isn't very many differences aside from being able to present profiles rather than just the evidence itself, the profiles being the characters involved in said trial. Overall, I'd say this is fine because I feel like at this point in the franchise, it doesn't need to be renovated. We need more of the same at this point. We will talk more about the story itself, which is the meat of the gameplay, if we're being honest. It is a visual novel after all, after we go over some of the other aspects. Without further ado, let's move on to the music. With the music of Ace Attorney, each game has a different composer. This game's composer, Naoto Tanaka, composed all of the tracks from Rises of the Ashes from the 5th chapter of Ace Attorney and did all of the music for Justice for All. Since all of the games have different composers, there are different styles that are done, with a similar theme throughout them all, that being the ideas of the courtroom. We've got tension, we've got intensity, and we've got the turnabout. All of those and more are shown in all of the Ace Attorney games as far as I'm aware. And for the most part, I believe all of these songs are on probably the same level. It's just about personal taste. This game has a lot of new tracks combining with some of the old tracks, giving for a very varied soundtrack. I'd like to say there's a good variety of tracks here, and some that you only hear for a short amount of time, such as the accident cases. The style may be different, but the theming's all the same. It really does give that intense feeling of being in a courtroom with your back against the wall. This game's 4th and final chapter had some of my favorite tracks so far, with that being the one of Shelley to Kill. The intensity just rises so much with some of what they do here. Now, I think Naoto Tanaka did a great job on this soundtrack. It is, quite honestly, very well done, and it has a much softer vibe, less Game Boy-y feeling, though you can still hear its roots in the song. it still feels like an Ace Attorney song in the end. Overall, I'd say the soundtrack is very, very good, and I think these soundtracks are just going to keep getting better and better as the technology progresses. Or maybe they'll lose their charm. We'll have to see as I go through these games in the future. Anyway, time for the art style. See, here's the thing. I don't think I can talk about art style for all of these games. Maybe the farther we get, especially into the 3DS exclusive ones, as they will be a lot crispier, I don't think I'll have a lot of comments to make on the art style in the end, as these are mostly the same artists. I will say this though, I found a lot less gripes with some of the characters being copied as, well, we didn't have that bonus chapter added. A lot of the animations were a lot more goofier, and you can tell we're slowly getting into a goofier, more fluid style without feeling so stiff and rigid. It's good to see that it's beginning to develop its own personality. Overall, I'd say the art style is starting to show more of that personality, and some of the animations are becoming more complex, some of the characters becoming more complex as well, with stories that are more complex, which, as you know, is what we're going on to next. This story in this game, oh boy. So, a lot of people find this game to have a very weak beginning, in third trial especially, but have one of the strongest final chapters in this series. I mostly agree with that, though I have some opinions here that may be a little different to what the general consensus is among the fans of this series. So, I'd like to warn you now, if you think you are interested in this game, or maybe you just haven't played it yet, I recommend you do so now to avoid spoilers. The most enjoyment of these games comes out from finding out these reveals yourselves, whether that be from learning them, or by solving the puzzles that are put before you. These games are well worth your time, and you can find the trilogy on sale very often. Look, this is your spoiler warning, okay? I'm gonna talk about the story right now. Chapter 1. Okay, chapter 1 was really, an interesting start. Okay, the amnesia thing, a little ridiculous, but it had more complexity than the first trial in this series, which I thought was nice. I really liked how it was very easy to find out who this killer was, revealing it at the very, very beginning, for the most part, but it still had a lot of goofs without taking itself too seriously, but still introducing us into the mechanics once again. These characters were enjoyable, and I liked the designs for the most part. Overall, I'd say Chapter 1 was well designed and a good start to this game. Chapter 2! Oh boy, oh my god. Look, okay. I didn't like this chapter. Overall, I'd say the story itself is good, and I like the mystery, but some of it just felt very bizarre. I understand with a lot of these Ace Attorney games, it's about going into these with a sort of insane mind perspective, solving mysteries that are just so out there it's unbelievable, and I love the whole idea that Maya is guilty because she technically did it, but in the end she didn't. I liked that, but I feel like some of the plan just doesn't make sense, and I understand if you want to leave some things up for interpretation or whatnot, but where Eenie Miney was inside of the chest, and I'm not sure how this all went down. A good chunk of this chapter, I just felt very confused. And it may have been because I took my time with this chapter, as I was very busy with finals at the time of playing this game, so I might have not retained all of the information, making this trial slightly harder for me, as I had to go back on all the information. It was mainly that bullet hole thing. It was not difficult, but I just spent way too long on it because I just did not remember. Now, chapter 2, I don't know what people think of it online as, but I just personally found it a little convoluted. While good, it just felt a little over the top. And maybe that should be what I'm expecting, as this is slowly going to become what the series is from the looks of it, as this can be seen in some of the chapters of the first game with some of the absurdity. There were good parts to it, and maybe I'm just a dumbass, but overall, I found this chapter alright at the best. Chapter 3! People did not like Chapter 3, and I guess I can see why. Some of the characters aren't likable, crime itself is very simplistic, and almost all of the people involved in this case are just not pleasant to be around. I didn't think it was that bad. Look, I know I just said some of the absurdity was too much for me in Chapter 2, but I like this. See, when I heard that there was the curse of Chapter 3, I was expecting like a terribly, just a miserable trial that had no sense at all. Overall, I'd say it wasn't even close to as bad as some of the trials in Danganronpa get. It was not great, I will say that. Especially with Trilo and Ben, they were kind of obnoxious, if I'm being honest with you. But I liked Mo. I liked a lot of the jokes that were told throughout this trial. And while not the most serious, it was a fun trial. It sort of just felt like that filler episode in a show. Wasn't terrible, but there's enjoyment to be found out of it. I can understand why people dislike it, because there's just some parts that are ridiculous, like the cloak went onto the statue that you just happened to get because the monkey carried it. Like, so much of this is just conjecture. Like, there's not a lot of evidence for this. Like, it's a little ridiculous, but in the end, somehow, Phoenix Wright always gets the correct conclusion. This is also the only one that you really do with Maya, and I know I said I didn't like Maya in the beginning, but she's grown on me. Pearly as well, a character I do enjoy. I'm glad she's in the game, even though she's literally like an 8-year-old. Like, bro, why are you bringing an 8-year-old to a murder scene? Like, do you not realize how bad of an idea that is, Phoenix Wright? Just drop her off at a daycare or something, bro. Anyway, time for the next chapter. Chapter 4! This is the most fun I've had with Ace Attorney so far. Chapter 4 is the best developed one. I loved it, and it felt like this is what this game was made for. Justice for all. The title makes sense after you beat this chapter. Justice for all. Justice for stupid clowns, for someone who literally technically murdered someone, but not really, because we've actually figured out it wasn't her, or dressed as someone else, but who wasn't really channeling either of it. In essence, this game is called Justice for All for a reason. This chapter cements that reason perfectly. I love this chapter. It's one of my favorite stories in fiction generally. It has one of the most intense beginnings, with a kidnapping. While I was skeptical at first with the Nickel Samurai, and I was thinking it was going to be a rehash of Chapter 3 from the first game, this turned out to be one of the coolest chapters. It brought that Magatama's purpose way up for me, especially with your client. This chapter was so well done, and I loved it, okay? There's a lot you can say about some poorly written trials in this game. This one just felt so good. I loved the tension, especially in that last part, and it flew by. This was one of the best chapters, and probably my favorite version of this courtroom drama I've seen. It was intense, and it had me biting my nails. There weren't any super absurd moments, and it made me happy to see Franziska von Karma. Dude, she was like obnoxious as hell throughout the entire game, and seeing her and being filled with like hope, that is a good game. You completely change the character by not changing them themselves, but by instead changing what they're doing. I loved this 4th chapter, and it was amazing, and I'm glad it ended where it ended. I'm still a little confused about Shelly the Killer, though, and I hope they reappear in future games. It would be interesting to see them reappear in future plots. Will they truly ever get their justice? Let's find out. Eventually. I haven't played Trials and Tribulations all the way through yet. I'm like on the second trial so far, so just like give me a minute, okay? Anyway, that's the story for you all. Thank you so much for listening. Let's get to an outro. Wait, what? Overall, I'd like to say the Ace Attorney series is starting off really well, and the fact that this is only the second game has me excited for the rest of the series. It's slowly getting more and more intense, and you can slowly see it setting into its own feet and shoes, or whatever the hell you want to say. That was a terrible analogy, or whatever. Anyway, I'm excited to play more of these, and the beginning of Trials and Tribulations was really cool, so I'm excited to see what the rest of the games hold. I've also started the Miles Edgeworth Investigations game. It's very good so far. Anyway, if you enjoyed this, make sure to stay tuned for the next videos in this series, and have a good one. Bye-bye.
Objection!